This is video 3 of week 1. So bilingualism then has a societal dimension, has an ecological dimension, has a cultural dimension, but it also has an individual dimension. And in this course, we're going to focus on this last one. So what I want to do from the start is to give you a sense of to what extent I'm going to be talking about people, really very real people. When I would tell you something about bilinguals this or bilinguals that, or whatever. I am not talking about some kind of abstract object of study. I am talking very much about individuals, about people, about a person. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example, and I want to keep you always this perspective in mind whenever for the rest of the course, even if I'm not going to emphasize it anymore. So let me just put the emphasis from the beginning. Who are these creatures, these little creatures? Who are we talking about when we talk about multilinguals? So here you have our subjects of study, just for an example, are going to be children, actually. We're going to start with children. Of course, multilinguals come in a variety of ages because children tend to grow. But let's just start with these children. So let me introduce to you our subjects of study, and whenever I say something from now on, keep in mind these cute creatures that I present to you here. So this is Alexandra, this is the eldest one, and this is Jana. So they are sisters, and I'm going to lay out for you interesting facts about each one of them. Let's start with Alexandra. Alexandra is an 11-year-old, and she likes horses. And that defines her in an extent that is hard to comprehend if you haven't met her. She is a person who likes horses, and that is the most expressive thing that you can say about her. Right? She does not like school, mostly because school does not have horses, so what's to like there? Therefore, she doesn't do good in school because she doesn't like it, because it doesn't have horses. So as for her personal way of interacting with the world, she could be qualified, and is often qualified by her parents, as messy and sloppy with work, with living spaces, and unfortunately with her own body, with self. She has, however, outstanding empathy as one of her most endearing qualities. And that is even surprising for a sweet girl, because she has a kind of projecting a theory of mind on others, and to understand the problematic of others, even if she doesn't have experience with the problems or the situations that others are going through, that are quite remarkable. Maybe that's why she likes animals so much, because she can empathize with them. That also makes her very solicited as a babysitter, as animal and people caretaker. She's the person that you want to take care of you if you get sick, for example. And she also has had a little bit of experience as a dog trainer, because her mother actually is into dog trainer, and she has been helping her mother, and she's excellent at it. And she is known for being a little bit of a horse whisperer, which means only that she can actually interact with horses very, very well. So she also, at her tender age, has used her time to volunteer in a nursing home for old people, terminally ill people, and has the patience and the empathy and the generosity to do that very remarkably. She, as for her psychological profile, would be qualified as on the spectrum of introverted, but she's very popular because she has this enormous empathy, and that makes her a very good friend, and therefore quite popular. She has a remarkable music ability as for cognitive abilities, and she has one of those uh, very rare cases of absolute pitch, just out of the blue. And then she's also quite good at sports, probably because she does so much horseback riding, and so she likes physical activity. And she also has a very remarkable, almost extraordinary episodic and photographic memory, and that is, as I say, just part of her cognitive makeup. She, as for her history, her cognitive history, is remarkable that she developed language early, ahead of what is a normal schedule as a mean, and nothing gifted or anything, but actually quite early. And as for projected future, she has the desire to become a horse trainer, as it is not surprising, according to everything that I've told you. So that was Alexandra. Her sister Jana, she's 8 years old, and you will see immediately that she has a very different psychosocial and developmental profile. She likes math, puzzles, mind games, and she is a bookworm. She does outstanding in school, especially science and art. And this is because school, of course, welcomes people who like math, puzzles, and mind games and like to read. I mean, she's the typical person who would pack 5 books for a week vacation and actually read half of them, surprisingly. So she is very academic oriented. She also likes animals. She just does not like riding horses like her sister, but she does like animals and nature. She has normal empathy for her age. She's very considerate, but she doesn't have this feeling that her sister has. She just is very nice and very empathetic in her way, but just on the nice way and the nice spectrum for her age. She is, however, assertive and competitive. She enjoys challenge. She does quite well in most of the challenges that she encounters, and she might get competitive without being mean to her opponent at all. But she enjoys that thrill of competition, of game, of playing. She is witty and funny, and there you see her intelligence. She shines at making jokes, at making word games, and she has an enormous sense of humor. She developmentally, she had normal language development. As witty and academic oriented and language oriented that she is, she actually developed on a schedule as expected. She is very good at sports also, especially at gymnastics, which she is training for, and that with that edge of competitiveness, and also just for the sake of physical activity. She, on the spectrum of a psychological profile, she would be on the extroverted side. And as for projected future, she wants to be an artist when she grows up and a farm owner. Her parents, of course, want her to discover the cure for cancer because with her intellect is what you would expect. But she is very artistic, very creative, and would rather dedicate her life to that. So that much for the differences that you see. They are very different people. And both of them, though, have in common that they speak 4 languages. So these are multilingual kids. They have that in common, but they are completely different people. That is my point. So when we talk about multilinguals, don't just put them in a bag as if they were the same kind of people. Multilinguals are obviously as diverse as any other category of people that you might want to identify. And still, we're going to put them in the same bag, so to speak, just on the respect that they speak 4 languages. Okay, so they are that they speak 4 languages in this case, meaning that they are multilinguals, and that's what makes them both subjects of our study. So what are these 4 languages that these particular subjects that I'm introducing here they speak? So they speak 3 natively, so 3 languages natively. That means from birth, and those languages happen to be English, German, and Catalan. And those they have developed more than they speak from birth, obviously, but they have developed them from birth. And another extra language, they're also native speakers of that language by now, their age, but they developed that one through migration from late school age. So the way in which they acquire those 4 languages is different. Now the end result, they are as native in one language as in the other for those 4 languages. They also understand another one language. You have to include all of the languages that are in their constellation of linguistic constellation, if you want, right? So Spanish, actually, there is also they understand it and they can communicate fairly well in it, but you want to make a difference because it's not like a native language, or they don't have native proficiency in it. And they also have familiarity with French because of circumstance and know 2 words of Mandarin. I mean, when you make a portrait of the linguistic makeshift of a person, you want to include everything because you don't know what would be interesting for study or would be an interesting part of their linguistic competence. Okay, so this is the linguistic characterization. Of course, multilinguals do not develop on a vacuum. Multilinguals become multilingual because of the context in which they have evolved. The same for any kind of psychological or social characteristic. So when you characterize a multilingual, it is very important to characterize the history of that person that brought that person to become who they are. So this is the history for these subjects that we are thematizing in this presentation. So they have a mother, and the mother was born in Catalonia, so she spoke, and we know that not only by interviewing the mother, but actually because of the sociology of the place where she was born, she spoke Catalan and Spanish. Wouldn't have automatically to be so, but she confirmed that in interview. She learned English and French in school and Italian in university. That we know by interviewing her. And then she declares that. She migrated to the United States at age 25, so that's fairly early, but later than being a child, and lived there for 20 years, which is actually a substantial amount of time, enough to be relevant. She learned German then through marriage in their late 20s. So even if it's late in life, in young life at least, marriage gives an intimate context. So the language might be relevant enough to point it out. How about the father? So the father of these creatures, he was born in Suabia. So he learned Suabian and High German. Again, it would not have to be necessarily the case, but by interviewing him, then we can learn that that was his history. He learned English and French at school. Again, wouldn't have to be like that, and Turkish in university. And that we'll know by interviewing the father and finding out what the linguistic history of the father is. He migrated to the United States at age 27, even though he previously stayed 1 year at age 17, because it being age 17 and being a whole year, it might have actually had an impact on the linguistic proficiency and the linguistic persona of the person. So then we include that there. He learned Catalan through marriage in his late 20s, same marriage as the mother learned German from him, so he learned Catalan from her, from all the other languages that the mother had, right? So how about the children? What is the history of the children? The children were born in the United States, therefore English is a given, so they learn English through that experience. They learn Catalan and High German from the parents, so those are the languages that the parents transmitted. From all the languages that the parents had at their disposal, the mother presumably transmitted Catalan, and the father chose High German to transmit to their children primarily. The children learn Spanish from a babysitter and from vacation, and that you have to document because you see the different context in which the children have acquired their different languages. And the children also learn some Suabian from the father and from vacation. But you see the difference, right? One thing is to get a language because it's a societal language. Another thing is because it's a family language. Another thing is because it's a coincidental language from some activities, either if they are intentional, like having a babysitter in that language, or just coincidental, like vacation. And they also learn French from school. That is also something that should be pointed out, but you have it in brackets because it's not quite one of their languages in the same extent. Now, the whole family migrated to the Netherlands 2 years ago, and that's where Dutch came from. It came from their migration to a place where the main language, the societal language, is Dutch, and they all acquire it in a different degree. So when you look at the language ecology of the family, when you try to characterize the language ecology, it's important to specify in which context which language is used and among which people. So one way of doing this is you can just construct a diagram in which you give a place for each one of the people that you are studying, and then you document which language they speak amongst themselves. So the mother and the father, and you have the two directional arrows, so that means that the mother speaks to the father and the father to the mother in English exclusively. The mother speaks to the children and the children to the mother exclusively in Catalan and to the father exclusively in German, and vice versa, the father to them. Now, the children amongst themselves, they speak either English, Catalan, German, and Dutch, either one of those, either all of those, or a mixture of those. In this diagram, we're not specifying the specific conversational style of the children, but all of those languages are present in their interaction, right? Now, the mother and the father, they speak other languages outside of the family, English, Dutch, Catalan, German, Spanish, and French in different contexts, but that is always outside of the context of the family, the same way that the children outside of the context of the family itself, they speak Dutch, English, Catalan, and German also. And here, this is very basic, so we don't specify to what extent they speak one or the other, or a mixture of any of the above. Now, when you characterize the bilingual, apart from the ecology of the family or the context, which is in this case is the family, you also can characterize each individual or group of individuals, here is both children, separately. Right. So for that, you have two parameters: language use, which languages they use on a regular basis, and you have, of course, a scale. Which languages they use on a daily basis, and which language they hardly ever, never obviously would have, many languages, so you don't need to make them explicit. But on a scale of from daily to never or almost never, which languages, where each language, which space each language occupies. Now, for language fluency, this is how well, so to speak, how well they speak the language. You also have a scale. So in some language, they might be very fluent, they have high proficiency in that language. In other of their languages, they might be a little more limited. So that gives you kind of a grid. It gives you a space in which you can locate each of the languages, and this is roughly the one that we came up for these subjects. So you see the different languages. You have Dutch, for example, in which they use every day because they go to school in Dutch school, and their fluency is very high because of that. English, for example, also because the Dutch society is such that English is quite present, and also because probably they speak to the parents and to other friends and so forth in English, so they have a lot of fluency, but not as much as Dutch, because Dutch they're schooled in Dutch, so English is a little bit lower in the language use, and but it's equally fluent. Catalan and German, because they're not school languages, so the language use, the language fluency suffers a little bit from that, and language use, since they only have one person to talk to, either their father or their mother, on a regular basis, so they also use it a little less frequently, Spanish, French, etc. Right? Obviously, people are dynamic, right? So the time dimension has to be considered. So if you see here the red arrow is the trajectory of the past to the present. So look at Dutch. Dutch started obviously not being a family language, so both the use and the fluency was very low, but then it raised very quickly to be a daily language and to have high fluency in these kids because it's the language of school, right? And then the other trajectory is the present to the future. So, for example, English is projected to get a little worse because they are not primarily on an English environment as they were when they were living in the United States, because yeah, there's a lot of English in Dutch society, but it's not as much as Dutch, for example, so it will suffer a little bit. And then Catalan and German was much better. And then because their lives get complicated and the parents get less important and their friends and so forth and society and their own lives is more important. So also it suffers in both in frequency of use and in fluency and so on and so forth, right? Probably they will get a little worse in English, they will get better in Spanish, who knows about French, etc. Right? But what I mean is that you have here for each individual, even though here we have a group of them too in this case, and of course you could make one of these diagrams for each of the kids, but you have characterized each language in this space based on two axes, language use and language fluency. For the mother, say, it looks very different. So the languages are different and the trajectories are also different. So the mother has not achieved, look at Dutch, the mother has not achieved the same proficiency as the children because the mother is not schooled in Dutch. And the mother also because she acquires, say, German and English later than the children, maybe her fluency and her daily use might also not be the same. The same for Catalan and Spanish, Italian, etc. Right? So for each individual, you have to kind of evaluate, and not kind of, I mean, you should evaluate it with formal tools, but at least you should evaluate and have a little bit of a map of which kind of multilingual proficiency this person has. Now, so this was just an example. And of course, once you get a characterization of your subjects, then you can come up with interesting questions to ask about that. So I want to do a first exercise with you about this particular case study and try to come up, I mean, to invite you to try to come up with interesting questions that you can ask about them. What has called your attention? What has caught your attention about this situation, these multilingual speakers, and which kind of questions, which kind of research questions do you have? So this is the first exercise of the course, and I would like you to come up with a few questions, maybe 3 questions or more if you want, but maybe 3 questions that you can actually share, and then that will be something that we discuss during seminar. So I'm going to stop this video here so that you can come up with the questions on your own and keep them, and then when we meet, then we can take those as point of departure. Okay, so go for it.